viewers, welcome to another exciting episode of Wired Women. This is Jennifer Nash, and my guest today is Katrina Ffrench, but I will let her introduce herself. Hi, Katrina, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you for having me and the lovely introduction. My name's Katrina Ffrench, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of an organisation called StopWatch, and we operate in England and Wales, and our focus is on promoting fair, effective and accountable policing.
Amazing. So tell me about Katrina as a person. Tell me a little bit about your background and how did you end up here?
Well, I'm born in South London. I'm of Jamaican heritage. My grandparents came here in the 1950s. And I suppose their journey has always instilled in me a sense of you can achieve whatever you want in life, and being determined and resilient and kind of carving your own future and path. So a lot of where I am and who I am is based on like the kind of journey of my grandparents. I'm a Cambridge graduate, so I studied social and political science at the University of Cambridge. I graduated just over a decade ago now. And since graduating, basically decided to serve my community, and I got involved in community initiatives, but also was employed in local government. And I stayed in local government for 8 years. And during that time, I was volunteering for various initiatives. And that's where I came across StopWatch. And I remember that I invited them to train the group that I was chairing. And I remember saying, I wish I'd worked for StopWatch. And here I am now in 2020, the chief executive of the organisation. So, my path hasn't been very linear. It's been a bit jiggedy, up and down. But I suppose that's most people's paths in life. It doesn't ever feel straight. But that's a bit about me.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit about this charity that you are Chief Executive Officer of. It sounds like an interesting organization. What is the charity all about?
Yes, so StopWatch is a coalition of academics, lawyers, policymakers, activists and young people. And it formed in 2010 after recognising that the stop and search rates in England, Wales were increasing, and that the outcomes were very poor, and that the impact on Black, Asian, ethnic minority communities wasn't being acknowledged. So this group of people came together, and we started as a project, and we were formally incorporated as an organisation in 2015. And I've been in post since 2018. And I suppose our primary purpose is to promote fair, effective and accountable policing, and to ensure that people that have been impacted adversely have access to legal advice, also understand their rights, and that they can participate in advocacy opportunities and make sure that their voices are heard and that changes and reforms can be made.
Brilliant. That sounds like a very noble charity. I mean, all charities are noble, but for me, this is particularly close to my heart. And obviously maybe as you as well, because as people of color, in the wake of Black Lives Matter, it looks like your organization has been ahead of that curve. Because if I recall very well, Black Lives Matter didn't exist in 10 years ago. So could you just kind of talk me through if there's any correlation between Black Lives Matter as a movement and what you do in your organization?
Well, ultimately, I'd say there definitely is some connection with the kind of hashtag movement slogan of Black Lives Mattering, because we know stop and search disproportionately impacts young Black males. So in this country, you're up to 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched for drugs as a Black male than you are compared to your white counterpart. So we're aware statistically that there's a problem. So I would say, yeah, you're quite right. We were ahead of our time in terms of picking up this particular issue. Nevertheless, really appreciative for the spotlight that the Black Lives Matter movement has shone on police brutality and, basically the unequal treatment of Black, Asian, ethnic minority communities. So whilst they came after us, I have to say that the impetus recently has definitely meant that organisations like mine have benefited from a raised profile.
Absolutely. And this is why it's such a privilege for me to have you on my show today, because every so often, as a person who's an activist and an advocate for social justice at heart, I like to think that it is my duty to cast or illuminate a spotlight on issues that matter in our society. So I'm really, really humbled and privileged to have you on the show today. And that being said, so could you maybe share with our viewers what it takes to become a CEO of such an important organization as Katrina as a person? What are those attributes that have led you to here, apart from your academic qualifications, which you rightfully fit into this role? But as a person, what are your personal attributes that brought you to this role?
I suppose similar to yourself, I'm an advocate of social justice, racial equity, freedom, equality, all of those things. So having that desire, that commitment, I was quite, I suppose, humbled to be invited to apply for this position as the chief executive. It also meant that my motivations around wanting to see changes and be a part of the change that I was seeking, it gave me that opportunity. Ultimately, to do the job that I do, you need to be bold, you need to be resilient, you need to be decisive, willing to be unpopular. And that's not that I say that lightly, but the position that we hold at StopWatch is an unpopular one in terms of public opinion, in that stop and search powers need to be reformed, that they're unfairly used. For most people, they're not aware of how they're used. They often view us as being anti-police or pro-criminality. So walking into rooms and presenting to audiences that aren't impacted it can often be quite challenging. So I suppose having some fortitude and reminding myself why I do this, and I do it because I love it and I have a skill set and academic education that means I can do it very well. But ultimately, I do it because I want to see a better society. I do it because I'm a young Black woman who has lived experience of being stopped and searched directly, and also through family and friends. And I kind of don't want to outsource something that I know I can do. So if I know I can do it, why not try and make a change and do it myself, as opposed to waiting for other people to do it for me or for other people to lead that sort of change. So yeah, that's, I suppose, some of the personal attributes that help me to do the role that I do.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for that. And you're right, there's a lot of discord associated with the subject matter. And there's a lot of misunderstanding as well as to some of the language that is used, for example, in Black Lives Matter, when people talk about white privilege against, everybody else, that what they do have and what they don't have. There's so much going on in the conversation, but also people not understanding exactly what is meant by those the unconscious bias that happens, that we face as Black people. So do you mind just sort of highlighting sort of what is the main takeaway your organization takes in terms of that misunderstanding, that discord that is going on in, like you say, to your point, in the public sphere?
Well, I suppose as an organization that's focused on police accountability, we have to highlight, because it exists, institutional racism, and that it presents itself in many forms. So it's not necessarily overt racial slurs in terms of police being, rude or unprofessional. It often results in unconscious bias in terms of a perception of Black people that I think often officers are not necessarily aware that they have. So I give you an example, I'm based in London, so policing a certain area, Lambeth, Brixton, where it has a history of, not positive relationships with the police, is that people going into that area may see all Black people, brown people as being the same. So when they're engaging with them, they don't necessarily exhibit the humanity and the compassion and the professionalism that they would do if they were speaking to someone in Westminster or Knightsbridge or, Covent Garden, and somebody that was of a lighter skin, whiter skin. So it's understanding that to be racist is not necessarily being horrible and saying horrible things. It's conducting yourself in a manner which is discriminatory, whether you realize it or not ultimately. And the power of stop and search policing is being used in a discriminatory way. And we think that is because of a personal bias on the side of the police officers, but also a bias in terms of how the power is used and what areas it's used in. So there's an overlap between, I suppose, geography and ethnic identity.
I agree with you. And this is one of those exceptions where, we all have to come to terms with the fact that ignorance is not bliss. So people have to just learn to educate themselves and understand, and also stand in a position where they normally wouldn't find themselves in, and stand in and walk in somebody else's shoes and just understand where that person is coming from. But I also seem to come to a place where I'm right in the middle, being married to a white person, having lived and breathed my life the last 15 years in this relationship. I find myself conflicted sometimes. Maybe conflicted is not the right word, but I also see their side of things from a, like you said, a human point of view instead of a structural or business point of view. You can actually see how that confusion can come about. And so what is it in terms of yourself as a CEO of this organization and as a person of color? How do you sort of deal with that, sort of educating the other side so that they can understand where we come from and legitimize, say, what our complaint is?
I think the starting point is the other side, white allies, accepting that they don't understand it all. So I think we have to start from the point of, if you don't know much on something, my personal perspective is your job to listen and ask questions on it. Challenge in some ways, yes, but in your challenge, it shouldn't be in such a way that it's undermining the lived experience that the person who's trying to, I suppose, educate you and inform you on, then feels that they can't have an engagement. And I know for white allies, that can be quite uncomfortable for anybody to be in a position of lack of knowledge. And I say ignorance, but I don't mean as an ignoramus. I mean as I don't know. So that space can be quite uncomfortable. But the first thing is identifying that you need to be in that space to be able to come out of it. So I think that's the first bit. Is having gone to the University of Cambridge, I have white friends and white friends that contacted me in this Black Lives Matter kind of moment and said, what can I do? And my main thing was, outside of what you already do, which is, listen to me, go on about racism, structural inequalities. You need to educate yourself. You need to read more books, provided an extensive book list, but also you need to challenge your friends. It's not enough to say, I'm going to engage with Black and brown people about these issues and just listen to them. It's when you're in circles where Black and brown people are, and it's what do you do then? Are you challenging just as much as you would do if you were in, a conversation about racism with a Black person and you had quite strong views? Are you still challenging the views of people that look like you? Because if you're not, then you're part of the problem. So I encourage people to have courageous conversations with their peers, with their families, and to use their platform as a way of engaging people that, because of some of their biases, when I speak, wouldn't necessarily listen. So I kind of explained to my allies that the job is to speak to your tribe. That's the job of what you need to do. You need to understand the problem, and then you need to go and basically be evangelic in terms of speaking to people who look like you to inform them that this is a problem. And it's not a problem that I should just be having to explain, but it's a problem that once you're knowledgeable about, it's your duty to embark and to have those conversations and not to wait for me to be there or any other Black person.
I see your point. However, to play the devil's advocate, and not that the other side is a devil's advocate, but for a Black person to argue for the other side, I guess then I'm putting on that hat. I think that, yes, education is really important, but I think that there's also a gap where emotional intelligence is sort of like lacking, or it's not inherent to understand how the other side feels. And for example, some people that I've actually spoken to, they kind of feel like they just cannot put their minds around to it. And they feel like we're always on default, where we feel like stereotyping everybody or we are just accusing them of not understanding or saying that they should learn and understand. They feel the same way towards us. They feel like we need to understand them. We need to educate ourselves about the fact that they're not necessarily privileged, because according to them, being privileged is material. And yet you and I both understand that being privileged is not necessarily the material economic factor. It's about just being in the skin that you were born in, that automatically opens different doors for you in comparison to a person of color. So how do you then address that situation of emotional intelligence where a person doesn't have the capacity to actually grasp what's going on?
Yeah, so I've come to accept, and it's just me being honest, is those people I leave other people to engage with. Those aren't people that I can spend my time trying to convince or persuade. If you're at a point where, as a human being, you haven't got the emotional intelligence to understand the harm of 500 years of slavery and colonialism, then I don't think, as the person that I am, the best person to engage with you. So I wish those people well, and I advise them to find other Black people who have the time, the patience to engage with them, because I don't. What I do in that sense is I go to younger Black people who, young Black people who haven't got enough representation or diversity, or because of the structural racism. And this is the problem, is far too often people take this personally. I'm not talking about whether you have Black friends or whether your partner's Black or what movies you like. I'm talking about the structural inequalities that persist in society. And for me, that doesn't take emotional intelligence. It just takes the statistics to look at. And when I hear people closing their ears to that, that's quite fine. But I recognize my life force is very limited. And if I'm going to engage, it needs to be with young Black people who have a sense of alienation, marginalized, and that they don't feel in Western society that they're afforded those opportunities. And I feel that my job is to demonstrate, regardless of what people think you can and cannot do, and the barriers of racism you can still achieve. So I leave those people that, have the lack of emotional intelligence or want to argue you don't see it from my perspective, and I leave them to God and to people like yourselves to engage with. And I take my energy and I put it into people who want to learn, to listen, and actually are being impacted by the said thing, which is racism.
That's a very fair point, and thank you so much for articulating that very, very well. So moving on to those racial tension, maybe to a lighter subject. So what is it in a day of Katrina, in your daily activities? What does your day look like? And what would you say to a younger self, let's say 10 years ago? What sort of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, gosh. Well. I think I'd give myself the advice that your success rate at getting through a bad day is 100%. So even when you have bad days in the future, you'll get through them. And I don't have many bad days, but it comes back to the work that I do is incredibly sensitive in terms of people that are impacted by negative police encounters, have often been injured or have lost complete trust, or have some now form of isolation because they don't want to engage with the police or sometimes society. So I'm dealing with quite an emotionally heavy subject, and hearing people go through that, it takes its toll on you. We are a small organization until recently. It was just me. So I now have an additional member of staff. So there's 2 of us, but the emotional and psychological toll of watching police stop and search videos or hearing parents' cries of concern about police treatment means that my job is, it's quite heavy at times. And that is in addition to, financial management, HR, media, I suppose managing staff, managing volunteers, the kind of structural mechanics of being a CEO. The kind of overlay of that is being a Black woman having to engage on matters that are quite, sensitive and are not new. I think that's the tiring thing. What I do isn't new. It's been around for decades in terms of a problem with policing. So when you go into meetings and you're having to say the same thing again and again and again, it feels a bit like you're insane. Nothing's changing, but I'm still having the same conversations with the people that I saw last year about why we need the police to do this. So I'd say to my younger self is persevere. And maybe it's not my job to in my lifetime to see that change, and it's not I'm defeatist, but my job is to know that I was part of the change, bringing it about. I don't necessarily need to be there to see it, but I know that the efforts and the work that I do now is definitely contributing to that. So that's a day in my life is very mixed at the minute, but I think the overlaying thing is remembering real people at the heart of what I do. They're not just numbers, and it's not just the state. This is humans, you know, and they have feelings and want the same equal treatment as all of us, regardless of race.
Yeah, thank you for that. Obviously, that's really important. I mean, you know, from what I'm hearing you saying, you've got that innate ability to do some self-care. I mean, who looks after the person who's caring for others? And then you've got to reach a point where you actually just tune that down a little bit, and find some space to reflect and just look after yourself. So I hope you do that a lot. And thank you for sharing what a day in your life looks like. I wouldn't want to exchange my spot for yours. I really have respect for you for doing that. And I'm sure our viewers would really appreciate that your days are not easy. And it takes some doing. Having said that, what would it be like if you had to give one specific soundbite of advice to, let's say, a young person of color who's just graduated from university and is looking, and they're very passionate about social justice, and they're looking to make a difference, especially, again, going back referencing to Black Lives Matter, they really feel that they're being called to make a difference themselves. What sort of advice would you give them?
Don't be deterred by any obstacles. See them as opportunities to overcome and to test your skill set in a way that you wouldn't do if you stayed in your comfort zone. And ultimately, don't let anybody define you. You define yourself, your actions. To some extent, they do define you, but people can change. So just because you are who you are at the age of 17 doesn't necessarily mean that's who you will be in 10 years' time. And that's not a bad thing. Life is about evolution. So I'd encourage them to throw caution to the wind and to take as many opportunities as possible, and to have fun doing it. You know, life is short, but it's long. It's sweet, but it's bitter, and it's nothing if we can't find love and laughter in all that we do. So I'd encourage them not to be, too not headstrong in work, but as you said, this is that self-care and work-life balance. And an empty vessel cannot give. So as much as they're passionate, dedicated, I want them to make sure that they're doing lovely things. And I think the year of 2020, if anything, has highlighted what it is to live. And you have to have something outside of work, whether that be family, friends, or hobbies or interests. It's really important that you keep something for yourself, because you kind of can't give all of yourself away, even though the world will ask that of you. And you won't even realize you're being asked to do it, because you'll just keep doing it. But you kind of, have to have some boundaries.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for sharing that, because, the idea to throw... To just let go, let your hair down and do it scared, even while you're scared, so be it. So what? You can only fail. So I guess there must be something in your toolbox that helps you to be so self-sustainable and to be able to tap into that power zone where you keep on refilling yourself. I realize that you probably self-counsel, but do you actually also get help externally that keeps you pumped up and refueled when you're feeling really low? Because like you said just now, you have been through challenges and you faced a lot of ups and downs. And how do you keep sustained? How do you sustain that mind?
I do have close friends. I also have a mentor who's been absolutely amazing and supported me over the last year. I've had different coaches in my life at different points. Recognizing you're not the oracle for everything, and it is good to take counsel from others. I think who those people are is very important. Everybody has something to say, whether it's worth listening to from everybody is a different question. So being able to identify your tribe, and this has nothing to do with race. I mean, your tribe is whoever you feel is helping you on your mission or supporting you or encouraging you. And to be fair, that can take some time in life to realize, because you can be around people and you're just around them, but they're not actually supporting your vision or pushing you. They're just there. So, I think that for me, I'm very fortunate to recognize I overthink, and I need outsiders to support me in my overthinking, and also to stop me from overthinking. So I'm really good with saying, actually, I need to speak to someone about this and reaching out. asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. That took me some time to kind of really to solidify, but I now accept that me asking for help or reaching out to someone is a sign of strength in terms of recognizing what I can and cannot do, or what someone can do better.
Yeah.
And there's always someone that can do something better. So what kind of keeps me going is knowing, as I said, it's short, but it's long, it's sweet, but it's bitter. And whilst I have the enthusiasm that I have now, why I go as hard as I can. And I think that's wise, because I recognize I might not wake up tomorrow morning and feel like this, but whilst I still have that feeling, I'm going to work with it. And I don't know how long it's going to go on for. So every day, and I wake up with it, I'm very grateful that it's still there, and that's what keeps me going. But I'm mindful that I could start a family in a year's time. Something could happen. I unfortunately lost my sister 6 years ago. And I think that was a poignant turning point for me in terms of why I want to make sure that I do what I can when I can, because you don't know how long you're here for. So that's the kind of driving, motivating forces. I can, so I do.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And my condolences again. I remember you told me about your sister, losing your sister, and that being your driving source of strength. Thank you for that. And this is very timely advice for young people. To your point, you just said, you need to pick and choose who you're going to hang out with, because they've got this mob mentality where they just want to hang out. And you get to a point when in life, when you need to start to cull the people that are around you, because not everybody is useful around you. Yes, some people are just there good enough to just laugh and be silly with, but in terms of mentorship and knowing which type of people you can actually depend on when the time comes is really, really important. So thank you for that very timely advice, especially during this pandemic period when people are feeling isolated and desperate. They don't even know where to start from. So before I let you go, it's unfortunately we're coming to the end of the program. I just wanted to find out if there's any way that people can reach out to you, maybe well-wishers, they want to make a donation, they want to find out more information about the amazing job that you do at the NGO. How would they come about finding you?
Great. So I'm on LinkedIn, so Katrina Ffrench, and I should say my name is spelled with 2 F's. It's very important. Yeah, it's very it's unique. Most people get it wrong. So it's Katrina is in the hurricane, only on a bad day though, and then French with a double F. So you can find me on professional social media platforms, and then also there's the website for the organisation that I run, which is StopWatch, and that is www.stop-watch.org. And we also have now currently a GoFundMe fundraiser on, and that's on the GoFundMe page, and it's a national fundraiser for police accountability, and that's been open since June and will probably close in the next couple of weeks. So there's an opportunity there to donate, and if you go to our website, there's also a donate page there. As well as, I suppose, all of the well wishes that I may get, may not get. Thank you for those in advance. I would really encourage people to just read about the work that StopWatch does. It's really important work in terms of police accountability. We're not anti-police. We're not, all white people are bad. Let's have a go at the police. It's much more about how do we make the police serve and protect every person, regardless of where they live, how old they are, what clothes they wear, all of those things that we don't even realize need protecting of, or need to make sure there's scrutiny of. So I really encourage people to just read about the work of StopWatch and why it's important and why we need police accountability and more fairness in the system.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Katrina. Normally, I would say it's been such a joy talking to you, but in this instance, I think that it would be more appropriate to say it's been very insightful and very enlightening talking to you, because it's a very, very important subject, but it's also a subject that is quite somber. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I've been very privileged to have you on the show, and I wish you all the very best with the organization. And thank you for your time.
Jennifer, I'd like to say thank you right back to you. It's, I think, 2 things. A, for the platform for the organisation, but as a young Black woman in senior leadership, it's just an absolute, honour to be able to come onto your show and share just not only my journey, but about the work that I do. So from me to you, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Have a good day now. Bye.
Bye.